Hey there, Freedom Forgers! It's Patriot Gal here, and welcome to another episode of the Forging Freedom podcast, where our mission is to help you build personal liberty one step at a time. Hey, today is Friday, July 16th, 2017, and tonight we're going to continue our Wisdom of Our Ancestors series, where we read and discuss various historical articles, journals, and books written by those who have forged their freedom in ages past to see what lessons and wisdom we can learn from them. Tonight we're going to read a fun story that talks about buried treasure, old mines, root cellars, planting potatoes, and watercress in the winter. So stay tuned and hang out with us. So you guys, I think it's been about 2 weeks since we were together last year at the Forging Freedom Homestead, and I would apologize for that, but I'm not going to. I had a great time spending some time with my family on the 4th of July. Not all of my family, but some of them. And that was a great time. Got to think about the independence for our country a little bit, and also kind of renewed my commitment to work on forging my freedom and to help all of you forge yours as well. So I hope you all had a wonderful time over the 4th. And then this last week, I went down to visit my folks down in St. George, Utah. It's in the southernmost part of our state, almost at the Nevada border. And my folks live down there, moved down there for health reasons, and they have a beautiful yard down there. It's a small yard, but my mom and dad grow their own food down there, and they do quite well. They had some beautiful peaches that I brought back with me. In fact, we dried a bunch of peaches while I was there. Used my dad's food dryer. I think I don't know. We must have dried probably 2 dozen peaches, And I brought those back in Ziploc bags, and then I brought back 2 big boxes of peaches. Now, these are the Red Haven peaches, and they are not that great for canning, but they're perfect for drying and also for freezing. So I think I'm going to be getting those froze and put in the freezer. So, okay. Oh, yep. Let me change the screen, Dick. Sorry about that. Hang on one second. Okay. Yeah, there's not any video. This is just mostly a voice podcast, and we're going to be telling some stories. So there won't be any video, but I did forget to change the picture, so I appreciate you letting me know about that. I'm just trying to figure all this stuff out still. All right, so how is the video level, guys? Give me your opinion on what the video level is like. And let me just see if we're, hopefully that picture will change soon. You know, those peaches probably would be good for jam, Heather. I think they probably would be, because Dad says that they, they tend to fall apart when you can them, so they probably would make excellent jam. All right, so it looks like the audio is good. Okay, so we're going to move on to our article here. This article is called Older and Bolder, and again, this is one out of my local newspaper. It's called the Ogden Valley News, and this is out of the December 1st, 2016 issue. And I'll just read you this little intro. It says, information for this historical account of the life of John Thompson Ritter came from the book From Swineville to Stringtown, Life in Eden, Utah, from the family of Hiram Stallings and Nancy Ritter. And that was compiled by Ray Wilmot. The setting for this is the early 1900s in Ogden Valley. All right, so this is a continuation of the story that ran in November 15th, 2016, and I will try to find that copy so that I can share that with you guys as well. Hey, Palmetto, welcome. Happy to see you over here. All right, so I'm feeling like the audio is a little loud. I'm blasting my earphones off. I'm just going to turn that down a little. Hopefully that's good for you guys. All right, here we go. We're going to start. All right. As we got older, we wandered further from home. We liked to go to the mountains and pick wildflowers. We called them buttercups and curly heads. They were very pretty and smelled so fresh. One day we took a lunch and picked a lot of flowers. The big kids decided to head for home. Oh, stand by. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Big kids decided to head for home, and we said we would follow soon. We had heard of some stills nearby, and there was some moonshining going on. We didn't know what a still was, but we wanted to look for one anyway. Then we remembered that someone had said there was always a person with a gun there watching for trespassers. We decided it wasn't so important to see it after all. Another place we had been told to stay away from was the old abandoned mine that went back into the mountain. We dared each other to look for it, and sure enough, we found it. It had a wooden door that was falling apart and a sign that said, "Keep out." We crawled through anyway and took a look around. Water was dripping from the roof, and was falling down, and the floorboards were still there, slick and slimy. We kept going until it got so dark we couldn't see anything. Still the water kept dripping on us. I thought to myself they would never find us if this caved in. Finally I started back, and the others followed me. We got out and we placed the door back in place and never told anyone about this episode. As we got older, we had more work to do. The girls wore overalls, just like the boys. We pulled weeds from the garden and hoed it. We thinned the beets and we hoed them. We kept mustard weeds out of the grain fields. We rode the derrick horse, and when the hay was cut and stacked, we picked peas and beans. We picked berries, and we helped Mother can them. Now, I thought that was pretty interesting to read that the girls wore overalls, because every, like Pioneer or old-time Western that you watch, the girls are always in these fancy dresses. And I have thought for a long time that that just didn't seem too practical to me, that I didn't know how anybody could get any work done. So it makes me feel better that the girls wore overalls. All right, it says we worked so hard that our favorite weather was rain. When it rained, we could stay home and do whatever we wanted. We popped corn and we made candy. Mother let us do whatever we wanted as long as we cleaned up our mess. We sometimes put our boots on and went out just to splash around. We loved those rainy days. Dad had bought a farm about a mile and a half north of the crossroads. This was the old Colvin place, and it had a spooky old house on the property. Then he bought an adjoining farm called the Walker place, which had many buildings and quite a large house. Our hired men spent so much time going back and forth to work that it was finally decided we should move there. The Walker house was remodeled. A sleeping porch, a bathroom, and a basement were added. The old kitchen was moved away and used for coal and wood. A crabapple tree near the house was in the way of the remodeling, but Mother loved the tree, so a kitchen porch was built around it. In the spring the tree was covered with beautiful and fragrant blossoms, and in the fall it was covered with apples. That tree never let us down. Its apples were used to make jam, jelly, and preserves. Some were even pickled. The remainder were given to the chickens and the pigs. About 1920, the people of Eden decided to put a water system in. Until then, each home had its own well, and water had to be pumped or carried into the house. The new water system was a great success. For the first time, we had an indoor toilet. We moved into the Walker place in the spring of 1921. Mother had to do most of the work, and when we had finally settled in, she said, "This is the last time I'm ever going to move." It was reminiscent of something her grandmother had said when she was coming west with the Mormon pioneers and reached Council Bluffs, Iowa. She said, "I'm not going one step further." Some have said that she might have used stronger language than that, and there she stayed. The new house had a cellar. There was a window on the north side that opened in the summer, but it closed in the winter, with padding between the glass and the screen. We had been told that Mr. Walker had buried his money somewhere on the farm. We decided that that cellar was the logical place. There was a block in the floor, and we tried prying it up. We had no luck at all. It wouldn't budge. When Mother explained that Mr. Walker hadn't had any money, our treasure hunting came to an end. The potatoes had to be planted. Mother, Ann, and I set out cutting them. They had to be cut in chunks, with an eye or a sprouting place on each. They had also been dipped in some poison that killed diseases. It smelled terrible. We put the good pieces in buckets and dropped the discards on the ground. Eventually, some chickens came around and started snacking on the discards. We noticed they were acting a little strange. Then they flopped over on the ground. Mother got out a pan of water and made them drink. They soon got up and staggered away. From then on, we put the scraps in a box, and when they dried up, we burned them. It makes me wonder what they put on those potatoes. I'm sure it was something to keep fungus off. It'd be very interesting to know what it was that they put on them. Okay, one day Howard, Ann, and I were chatting in the kitchen. I was leaning against the stove. I was leaning against the stove, warming my backside. Howard was leaning against the cabinet, and Ann was sitting on the table. Suddenly my feet slipped out from under me and I plopped down on the floor. Mom came in just then and gave Howard the dickens for kicking the feet out from under me. I explained that it had been my fault, and she apologized. In the new house, there was only one clothes closet in Mother and Dad's room. We needed one upstairs. Beulah and I started looking around, and we found an old cupboard in the granary in the Colvin place. We dragged it through the fields and scrubbed it clean in the backyard. While it was drying, we thought about how we would get it upstairs. There were too many rooms and stairs to take it through the house. The window was our best bet. We climbed up a ladder and got on the roof of the sleeping porch. We took the whole window out very carefully with the aid of the ropes and muscle power. We got it through the window before anybody knew what we were doing. Getting the window back in was a lot harder than getting it out, but we managed that too. Okay. Mother had a bag full of maxims for us when we put off doing a job. One of her favorites was, "A task begun is a task half done." Another one was, "Never put off until tomorrow what must be done today." There was a spring on the hillside just west of us where the water cress was growing. In the early spring, we would wade through the snow to get some of it. We had few green vegetables during the winter, so the water cress looked especially good. Mother said it was like a spring tonic. We used scissors to cut it off just below the water line, leaving the roots to grow another crop. Sometimes we brought along bread and butter and made watercress sandwiches. Once we took some hard-boiled eggs. Beulah, Howard, and Ann and I were going, and a neighbor boy asked to go along. We got another egg, but this one was not hard-boiled. We decided to play a trick on Beulah, who was always a good sport. We made our watercress sandwiches and arranged that Beulah would get the raw egg. But the neighbor boy noticed that Beulah's egg was bigger and offered to trade. One of us suggested that we open our eggs on our heads. At the count of 3, everybody broke open his egg. The raw egg ran all over the neighbor's head and face. He recited every swear word he knew, and then he ran home to tell his mama. We didn't tell our mama, but we waited for repercussions. We never heard any more of it. And that's the end, guys. So, can you guys tell me if the picture has changed on the screen to an old barn picture? I don't see it changed on my live stream here. I probably need to refresh my screen maybe. It's probably what the issue is. This YouTube live stuff is tricky. It is tricky for those of you that do it really well. I commend you. All right. Says that we got 2 people watching. Okay, fantastic. Oh, yep, there's the barn. Okay, good deal, guys. Just getting the hang of this. So I appreciate you guys hanging in there. So anyway, I love that story. There's some details in there that I really think are cool. I have been trying to eat more seasonally. And the more I try to do that, the more I think of our ancestors trying to do the same thing and how difficult it would be just coming out of spring, or coming out of winter into spring, how long it takes for things in your garden to, mature and to get where you can actually eat something out of your garden. So I've been thinking about that a lot, and you definitely, I can see why they preserve so much and how it wasn't just, kind of a fun thing to do or nice to have. It was absolutely essential that they had those things to eat when, times got tough, and when winter, lingered on. They would have to have those things to sustain themselves. And I love watercress sandwiches. My grandma, when we were kids, she would make watercress sandwiches for us. She would get fresh bread, and then she would smear butter on it, and then she would put the watercress sandwiches on, or the watercress in the sandwiches. And we just ate them all the time, and I remember how peppery they were. And it was such a treat for us to go out there. They had a little free-flowing well in the front of their house, and it ran down this little ditch, and I think this little ditch was probably not more than 8 or 9 inches wide and maybe 3 or 4 inches deep. And I remember we used to catch frogs out there, but there was watercress growing the whole length of that little ditch, and they had ducks, and the ducks would go in there and get the watercress too. And we loved watercress sandwiches. I would love to find a way to grow it here on the homestead. And I'm trying to figure out a way to do that. But I live in this valley, and they say that it's over there at Spring Creek, so I may go over there and see if I can go over there and collect some. So I also like the story about the root cellar and how they had a thing where people might have buried their money there. That was actually pretty common. People did bury money on their property. My husband does a little bit of treasure hunting, and it's amazing what they find sometimes. Nobody's ever going to get rich by it, but they do find things from time to time. All right, guys. So that's pretty much all I've got for you in the way of a story. And like to see what's been going on with you guys. It looks like we've got 4 people watching now. So I know it's very late on the East Coast, and a lot of my subscribers are on the East. I usually get the folks that are somewhat insomniac, and I do get a lot of people that watch later on after the episode comes out. But anyway, I'm going to type in a comment right now and just say hi to y'all. And if you guys could let me know if my voice is going along with my typing in of my comment, if there's a lag. It looks like my stream health is pretty low right now. So, what's been going on with you guys? Hey, Dan's Urban Survival and Prepping is with us. Hi, Dan. Hey, you missed the story, but hopefully you can go back and listen to it later. Right now we're just talking about different things on the homestead. You know, one thing I wanted to mention to you guys, and I was going to mention this earlier. Someone asked me once where I go for my news, and as you know, there's a big debate in the country right now about fake news. And I've definitely seen my share of fake news. I think it worries me more when I see news outlets that we've trusted forever reporting things that are inaccurate. And so someone asked me where I go to get my news, and so I'll tell you, I go to one website I go to is called futuredanger.com, and it's much like the oh shoot, I can't remember the name of it right now. Well, futuredanger.com, I'll think of it in a minute. Okay, it's much like the Drudge Report in that it's kind of a collector of news stories from all over the world, and that's one source that I use, futuredanger.com. The other one, of course, is the Drudge Report, and it collects news stories from all over the world. I will say that it is slightly biased to the right, I would say. I also look at Breitbart.com, and I know they've got a tongue lashing from the left and from CNN, and they definitely do lean to the right, and I don't think they make any claim to do anything other than that. And so, but I do find some stories on Breitbart.com, and I just try to keep my, you know, I'm not only a homesteader, but I am also a prepper. And, you know, I use that term loosely. I've kind of always been a prepper, I guess. I was raised in a preparedness mindset. My grandparents were, my great grandparents were. It's just something that we've always done. And so I like to keep my eyeball a little bit on world events, local events, that type of thing. I do kind of try to prepare for more of the local things and not worry so much about the world things. So, in other words, it's more likely that you're going to have a sickness in your family or a death in your family or a job loss than it is for us to have an EMP. Now, do I think having an EMP is possible? Absolutely. Do I think it's likely? Well, I think it's more likely than it has been in the past. But, you know, for sure, some of these other things I mentioned are going to affect most of us at some time or another. And so, you know, being prepared for those things helps us to be prepared for the bigger things. You know, once I work on my preparedness for the things right around me, the personal things, then I work on the regional things. You know, I look at and assess what the regional threats are, the local threats, I should say, not the regional, but the local threats. You know, to me here, I live in a pretty safe neighborhood, but I do keep my doors locked, practice some security measures. Um, I do live in an area where fire could be a problem, and so we prepare for that. Dan says there's about a 10-second delay, so that's good to know, guys. So yeah, and then I prepare for the regional threats, state threats, you know, country threats, world threats. I kind of go out. But that's kind of my philosophy on preparedness. I think I've kind of refined that after listening to some different things. One podcast that I listen to quite often is the Survival Podcast with Jack Spirko. I would suggest that you listen to that if you're interested in preparedness. He takes a kind of a stance, especially his early ones were preparedness, a lot about preparedness. But the later versions, he's talking about more of modern preparedness, and his message is much the same as mine in that he promotes personal liberty. So we've been going about 30 minutes here, guys. What would you guys like to talk about? I see that Heather Going Batty is in the house, and if you guys have not watched their channel, I am going to give them a shout out right now. Go over and check out Going Batty. They have a great channel. She does cooking videos. They do all kinds of videos that are just wonderful. Good God-fearing folks. You don't have to worry about letting your kids watch that channel. Um, who else we've got here? Palmetto Paratrooper stopped by. You'll see him in a lot of the preparedness type things. I would also like to give the Homestead Network a shout out, homesteadnetwork.com, which is a website that was started by Brad over there at the, oh, oh shoot, I can't remember the name of his channel. Somebody help me out here. Brad and Krista. And the Homestead Network is nothing more than a website that lists homesteading channels. And if you look on there, you can see the schedule of when different things are going to be on. And so anyway, Brad and Krista have a great channel as well, and they started that, and they're sharing their adventure with us. And I love to watch their channel. Also, Off Grid Nation is one of the ones that is on their list on the Homestead Network um, uh, website, and that is a great channel as well. I missed the episode tonight. Yeah, thank you, Heather. Big Family Homestead. I don't know how I could forget that because they do have a big family. They have quite a few kids. Well, it's not, to us here in Utah, the amount of kids they have is not unusual. Like we have a lot of big families here in Utah, so it's not really that unusual. In fact, my best friend was the youngest of 12 children when I was growing up, and I had a lot of friends that had big families, and um, some of the best people I know have big families, and they're just, I don't know, I think they have an opportunity to learn how to share and cooperate and get along, better than smaller families. So anyway, yeah, so give those two channels a check out if you guys aren't already aware of them. I love those channels. Another one that I would have you check out is called Viking Preparedness. Pastor Joe Fox is the guy that runs that channel, and he is ex-Special Forces dude, and he can give you a lot of good information about security, and he also runs some training if you're interested in that kind of thing. Good legitimate source, God-fearing guy. He lives pretty much off grid, and his is a great channel. Although I know he's been putting a lot of things over there on, I can't remember the other option. He's been putting some of his stuff on YouTube, but he'll tell you when you get over there that he's got some options of other places that you can watch his stuff. All right, so let's see. Dan's Urban Survival and Prepping says, I'm in the middle of 13. Is that 13 kids, Dan? If that is, that's like totally awesome. And you could probably share some experiences with us about big families. So I am glad that you guys stopped by tonight. It's always a little discouraging when you only see 3 people watching, but I know that a lot of that is the time of day, and I appreciate the 3 of you that are here right now. Like I say, a lot of people will catch this later on because they're sleeping right now. Dan says, yes, 13 kids. So you're in the middle of 13. I think that means you're the middle child. in 13. So that's just really awesome. I don't know what your experience was like, Dan, but I typically, when I see big families, they're just wonderful, well-adjusted folks. So, and I just think that I don't want to drop a lot of religion on you guys right now, but I just think when you read the Bible, the first commandment that God gave was to be plentiful and to replenish the earth. And I don't know, but I don't think I've read anywhere in the Bible where He has retracted that commandment. So I think we are commanded to do that. And it's interesting. You'll hear. I remember in the 60s and 70s there was a lot of stuff. Oh my gosh, you were all raised in St. George, Utah. That is so funny, Dan. I don't know if you were here when I was talking about. I was just down seeing my folks in St. George this last week. I was down there for I was down there for 5 days. So yeah, my folks are just down there in Hurricane, which is spelled like hurricane, but it's pronounced hurricane if you're from the area. And that's where they have retired at. And um, the my dad's parents have ties down in there. And I visited a place down there called Pipe Springs. So if you ever get down in that area, you want to go visit. It's Pipe Springs, Arizona. It's just barely across the Utah border. Very fascinating place. It's like an old stone fort that was built over top of a spring, and it's like super cool, and they give great tours there. It's now a National Historical Monument or something like that. Heather says, I love the story that you read. It reminds me of the story my grandmother tells me of her childhood. Yeah, Heather, and that's why we share the stories. Not everyone, eh, I've always known what my family history is, and I've got a lot of written family histories from folks in my family, but not everybody does. And I think it's, what we're trying to do here is create a family for folks that maybe, I mean, you got your own families, but not everybody has a family, or they come from a dysfunctional family. And I really want um, everybody to feel like they have family here. And so that is one thing that we are trying to promote. Um, Heather says, so happy that God blessed us with 4 children. I'm happy that He blessed you with 4 children as well. I think that is totally awesome. And I just, I was starting to say that when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, there was a big propaganda thing about overpopulation. We were going to overpopulate the world, and the world was going to come to an end. And I also remember about that same time that they said we were all going to die because we were going into an ice age, and the polar ice cap was getting bigger, and if everything was going to get too cold and we were going to go to an ice age. And so they had this harebrained plan to go up there and sprinkle some ashes on the polar ice cap so that it would start melting, or at least slow it down. And of course now they're telling us that it's melting too fast, and yeah, some crazy stuff. But anyway, I recently read that Europe is not producing children enough to sustain themselves. China and Japan have had this problem for some time. They're a little bit ahead of Europe, but they say that a society has to have like 2.1 or 2.2 children to just be able to replace themselves and to have a younger working society that keeps the economy moving, and also frankly pays into these entitlement programs to make the Social Security and everything work. And right now, the U.S. is right on the border. Um, they say that if it wasn't for our south of the border friends that were here in the United States, that our birth rate would be too low to sustain our country. And so I am a big proponent of having children and raising good kids that can be productive members of society. And I think, with all that's going on, that's crazy in this world, it's the probably the one thing that you can do that has the most impact on the future of our country is to raise good kids that will be responsible and God-fearing and um, good adults, um, that will be responsible citizens. So anyway, um, I think that's about all I've got to say tonight, guys. I'm feeling a little dry here. If you guys got any questions for me, want to know anything about me, type them in. Now's your chance. And I know it's kind of late for everybody, and I think I'm going to sign off here. But I just want you guys to remember that everything you do that makes your life more independent and anything you can do to divorce yourself from these systems that are either government designed or man-made designed, and get closer to your creator, get closer to the land, do things that increase your personal liberty. And that's our message. That's our message. That's what we're trying to promote here at the Forging Freedom channel. So I'm going to say goodnight to you guys. And remember that God loves you, and to go out today and do something to forge your freedom. Bye now.